Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I am Travis McIver. I am with Far Northern Regional Center, and I am the emergency coordinator here. So, once again, welcome to our YouTube channel, and I post classes on how to prepare for emergency events, safety topics, and just overall disaster type discussions. So thank you for joining us. And today's class that we're going to be going over is dealing with strong winds. So here in Northern California, we do see a substantial amount of strong winds during certain times of the year, and they can cause a whole bunch of different types of factors that we as members of the community have to deal with. So we're going to discuss those today. Allow me to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so here is our class on strong winds. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to cover a little bit about the importance of adhering to strong wind warnings in your area, the impacts that winds can have onto your homes, and along with the impacts of how wind affects driving conditions. We're going to talk a little bit about the power outages that we see fairly frequently here in the North State. And we're going to talk about inspecting your property after heavy winds have passed, and a little bit about preventive measures on how to protect your property against the potential of a strong windstorm coming through your area. So, strong wind warnings. Strong wind warnings should be taken very seriously. People tend not to think of winds as a serious threat when they compare to the other natural hazards that we see here in Northern California. I know we get lots of fires. We do get rock and mudslides from time to time, occasional flooding even. But when we get all of those big disasters like that, people tend not to really consider wind as much of a threat, but it really can be. So we need to really focus on wind when we do receive these messages. So strong winds can damage homes, your vehicle, cause injury. There's even been recorded history of people losing lives involving strong winds. Recently, strong winds have been spreading fires through in the Hawaii area. So I know a lot of us have probably seen on the news with the very horrible fire situation that happened in Hawaii. But one of the things that made that fire even worse was the fact that these winds came through and really expanded the fires, and it just created devastating destruction for the community of Hawaii, which is very sad. So winds can be very dangerous in multiple ways. Strong winds can be predicted in advance. So please listen to your weather warnings and check your weather regularly. Okay. If it's a good idea to check your weather every morning before we go about our daily business, so you can kind of have an idea of what's coming your way. Now, how they predict strong winds is just kind of an estimation of due to like air and wind pressure, and they can kind of calculate that. That's what kind of gives them the weather staff the ability to kind of determine if we're going to have some of these strong winds that come through our area. Now, what's interesting is the strongest winds that we see usually typically happen in the morning or the evenings. And the reason for that is because the temperature changes, creating air pressure change as well. So as the sun is either coming up in the morning or it's setting in the evening, what happens is those air pressures really begin to develop differently from the normal occurrence of what happened in the day. And wind patterns can either reverse direction or they can just get really strong. So all these different things can happen during these type of the days. And that's why you tend to see a little bit more breezy activity in the morning hours or in the evening hours. So impacts to homes. Strong winds are reported to damage homes every single year here in the nation. Now, the damage can either be done by direct or indirect wind damage. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those two differences are. So, direct wind damage is basically when the wind itself is what's causing the damage. So, examples of this is when the wind comes through and is very strong and it pulls shingles off of the roof of your house. Okay, that's an example of direct wind damage. Now, an example of indirect wind damage is if the wind pushes over, for instance, the tree, and the tree collapses and falls on your house or your car. That is indirect wind damage, meaning the wind pushed the tree over, and the tree is really what caused the damage, but the wind is what caused the tree to fall. So that's a form of indirect damage. Another thing that tends to get damaged quite often due to these strong winds is going to be fencing. So please make sure you check your fences after a strong wind has passed, especially if you have pets. You don't want your pets going out to explore the neighborhood once they find a new opening in what used to be a secured fence. So please consider that as well. That's usually going to be well, actually, fence damage can happen both in a direct or an indirect manner. Homes can also be damaged by siding can get pulled off. Multiple different ways. So it's very important to inspect your property after these windstorms come through. Driving conditions. So what a lot of people also don't realize is that wind actually does have a major impact on our driving. If you're going to be going through a windy area or you know that it's just going to be windy, it's very important to try and slow down, because the faster you go, the easier it is for your car to be kind of blown across the side of the roads. Okay, so if you happen to see signs like the one up here on the top of the slide here that says wind gusts, make sure you start to slow down. Okay, make sure you're going the speed limit or below the speed limit. Don't risk this. What's interesting is that a lot of people don't realize the fact that these big semi trucks. So you can see on the bottom of the slide here, this is a real event where the wind has caught the trailer of the semi truck and it's pushing it over. I know a lot of people think that those trucks are big and heavy, but unfortunately, because the way they sit, they really catch the wind, and that wind pressure just can pull over the trailers on these trucks. On the top of the slide here, I'm not sure which state this was in, but here's a sign example that says 21 semis were blown over in 1 month. So this happens a little bit more frequently than what a lot of people may understand. So be aware of that. If you're going to be in one of these high wind tunnel type of areas and you're driving your car, maybe keep your distance from some of these larger trucks, because there's not a whole lot these truck drivers can do about it. It's just going to be a strong wind that hits their truck. And unfortunately, it can push these big trailers over, and it can be very devastating if you get caught in the middle of that. So be aware of those type of situations. Now, another thing is that if you're going to be driving on the roads, certain items can be blown into the roads, which also becomes now a hazard obstacle. So, for instance, like community areas such as like trash cans, toys, lawn furniture, all these things can catch the wind and be pushed out into the streets. And that's why we need to continuously drive a little bit slower in these areas when you're having strong winds, because you might not be able to just slam on the brakes quick enough, and one of those trash cans might roll right out in front of you, and now you're going to hit the trash can and damage your vehicle. So we want to avoid that. Also be aware that winds tend to be a little bit stronger on places like bridges or tunnels. It's just the way the wind flows through those areas. It can create a stronger wind gusts. So you should always drive a little bit slower in those tunnels and those bridges. And then finally, for driving conditions, if it's cold outside and there's moisture on the ground, when the wind comes through, it can actually create black ice, because the wind is going to help freeze that liquid on the top of the roadways, and it's very difficult to see, and your vehicle can lose traction. So that's just another reason why to just drive a little bit slower on these windy days. Power outages. I know a lot of us that have been living in the North State here for a while, you've seen your share of power outages. So this can happen from two ways. One, that could be a planned power outage. And what happens with a planned power outage is that the power companies receive information from the weather channels that strong winds are coming their way, and that can create a hazard. It can create sparks, which will in turn create fire. So what these power companies do is, as a safety measure, they will purposely shut off the power, and that is until the hazard is passed, and then they will reestablish the power in your area as soon as possible. Now, another reason why we can get a power outage due to wind, of course, is once again trees. They catch wind very well, and they can be knocked over, especially if it's an older tree or the soil is maybe dry or weak, that the tree can fall over quite easily. And if that happens, the tree is going to fall over on maybe some power lines, creating a power outage. Or the lines can actually just get damaged themselves directly by the wind if the wind is strong enough. So there's a couple of different ways that these power outages happen. But the important thing is to be aware of that. So when you get up in the morning and you check the weather channel and you see that it's going to be very windy, one of the things that we should have in the back of our mind is that the power may shut off later. So you should get your essential items ready so that they are easy to find if the power does go out and it happens to be dark. Okay, so make sure you have things like your flashlight, your wallet, your keys, other important documents. Okay, have those in a spot where it's easy to find. That way, if the power does go out and it's dark, you can just go straight to that spot where you put those items, and you can quickly find them, and you can use them as needed. Let's talk about inspecting your property now. So after the windstorm has passed through, it is important to inspect your property for damage. Okay, don't wait on this. The reason why I say that is because even if the storm didn't seem that bad, you may not know that certain damage may have occurred to the top of your house. So like your shingles, okay, maybe your heating, your air conditioning system could have been damaged. It's important to go and check that right after the storm. That way you can report it to your insurance company, because if you wait too long, that may be more difficult to get it cleared with your insurance company and get those items financed for repair. Okay. Sometimes these insurance companies have time restraints on when you can report something. So it's very important to do this as soon as possible. So one of the things to look for is roof damage. A roof can also see the brunt of a windstorm, just because that's where it's usually getting hit with the most when it comes to the wind, right? And if you have any type of loose shingles, the wind can catch these and just pull them off. And now you're going to have obviously a damaged roof. It may start leaking later. So you're going to have to get that replaced or fixed. So just make sure you check that out pretty quickly, and record what type of damage has been there. You're also going to want to check the exterior of your building. There could be something as simple as something got knocked into your house and kind of scratched your paint, or um, maybe some of the siding got it loose, whatever the case may be. But you're going to want to record all of that. So you're going to actually walk around your whole building and check for any signs of damage. Even if your siding might just seem loose, you're going to want to get that fixed, because the next windstorm, it can actually possibly rip off the whole thing. So if you do check, make sure you're checking to see if the siding is sturdy. And yeah, if it's not, you can report that to your insurance and see if they can't get somebody out there to repair that. Your fencing. I know we mentioned fencing before, but fencing is something that gets damaged quite easily in the strong winds. So I would suggest that when you check your fencing, if it's a wooden fence, actually grab like every other board or so and kind of move it and see if it's just wiggling around. If it's wiggling around, all you have to do is just go get a new screw and screw it back in, or a nail and a hammer, and that'll retighten that board. Because if you don't do that, eventually these strong winds are going to take apart your fence. So if you just keep your common upkeep on your fence, it'll last much, much longer. Um, for trees on your property, trees receive a lot of wind damage. They can completely fall over. But another thing is that look around your property, make sure there's not a bunch of branches laying on the ground now, pine cones, leaves, all that kind of stuff. You're going to want to clean that up. The reason why you want to clean that up is because if you don't, it will dry out, and now that's going to become a fire hazard later on during the summer months. So you don't want to have all that stuff just hanging out. So it's a good idea to get it in a nice pile and remove that stuff from your yard when it starts to fall off the trees in these heavy winds. Windows are something that can obviously be damaged fairly easily. Things can get blown into them. You can check the siding of your window, make sure that your sill is still good. If it is damaged, just be aware of the broken glass and have somebody come out and look at it and get that replaced as soon as possible. So how do we prevent some of this damage from happening in the first place? Well, there's a couple of measures that we can take. So the first one we're going to talk about is your trees. So we already talked about how these branches and pine cones and leaves can fall down. But one of the things that we can do if you want less of a mess after the winds come through, we need to make sure we're pruning our trees properly. So if you happen to see dead branches on your trees, go ahead and cut those off, because what's that's going to happen is those are the first branches that are going to break when it's windy. So if you take care of it ahead of a time, it's going to be much easier for you in the future. Also, if the tree itself looks like it's dead or dying, you may want to have a company come out and remove that tree, because that's going to make the tree weak and then it can collapse, and you don't want it to damage your car or your house or land on somebody. So it's a good idea to have that tree removed. Next, tie down your lawn furniture. A lot of us that have, those outdoor tables with cool umbrellas and all that kind of stuff, make sure you're tying this stuff down. Those umbrellas catch wind very easily, and they can fly around and become a projectile and hurt somebody. They can hurt your pets. Maybe they can damage a window. Or that stuff itself is just expensive, so you don't want it to break, right? So let's make sure we strap this stuff down. You can put sandbags on the table to keep it in place. The umbrella itself, either remove it or tighten it up so that it's not going to catch wind directly. Okay. Now, if you have lawn furniture and let's say it's just getting towards the winter or late fall, and you're not going to be using it for a while, the best thing to do is just put it away and then bring it back out when spring shows up. Okay. That's the safest way you can handle your lawn furniture. But if you know you're going to be using it, just make sure you're strapping it down pretty good. Checking the weather frequently. This is definitely a key to all of this. Is always to make sure you're checking the weather. When you get up in the morning, just make it a habit. Find out what the weather's going to do the day. Because if you find out that it is going to be very windy today, that's when for instance, you can strap down those long ornaments, or you might want to go look at that tree really quick. But that can just kind of give you that healthy reminder that it is going to be windy, and that you probably should look at taking care of some of these situations before hazards can be created. Here's another one. So unplug your high risk electronics. What I mean by high risk is that your expensive electronics, or the electronics that mean a lot to you, or they may be hard to replace, you're going to want to unplug those when it's very windy out, because what happens is if the wind knocks out the power and the power shuts off, sometimes the power these shutoffs can have stress onto your electronic devices, because that's not how they normally turn off. Now, if these items are shut off quickly and not shut down properly from a power outage, they might not come back on. So the best thing to do is simply unplug it until the windstorm is past, and then you replug in those high valuable electrical items. And this will save you grief or having to replace some of these items that you may like a lot or use a lot. If you can, park your vehicle inside of a garage. If you have your vehicle just outside and it's very windy, your vehicle is subject to the elements of things blowing into it, a tree falling over on it, um, items just smacking up against it. We talked about, for instance, like the trash cans that can get blown around. If you don't want your car getting scratched and you do have a garage, the safest place to put it is inside the garage during these windstorms. Um, so consider that as an option. I know not everybody has garages, but it's a potentially good thing if you do have it, is just put that car in the garage. Keep your pets indoors, as we mentioned before with the fences. Okay, these windstorms can push down fences, and then your pets may get excited and find a way out through those new holes, and it's going to be difficult to find them again, maybe. So don't let your pets go and explore the neighborhood. Make sure that you check those fences before you let your pets back out after the windstorm has passed. Next, protect yourself. Avoid standing by things that could potentially fall over or hurt you. So in a big windstorm, don't seek shelter underneath big trees. Some of these trees can fall over, and if you're going to be next to them, you don't want to have that tree fall on top of you. Okay. Unfortunately, there has been deaths recorded where a tree has fallen over onto somebody, and it's just because of these strong winds. Okay, so make sure that you're not standing near items that either can blow on top of you or get knocked over onto you. You want to be standing in either open areas or just find shelter indoors for a while until the storm has passed. And that's going to be it for this class. I hope you got something out of it, and there's going to be more to come. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.